Hey y'all, so today we're going to be talking about setting up routines that work for your real life because I don't know about you, but there's just something so powerful about setting up a solid routine that is effective. Because I know that for our family, there have been many times that I've tried to set up routines that have just been so ineffective. And in fact, we have found ourselves sort of at that crossroads here within this new season of our life. I started realizing at the start of this school year that our old routines weren't really working anymore. And that no matter how many times I tried to tweak those old routines, I just couldn't quite get it to go again. It was like that cog in the machine. I couldn't get it to move. And so over the last several weeks, we have been slowly implementing some new and better routines into our daily life in order to make sure that things aren't falling through the cracks. And so I wanted to share with you some solid ways of being able to develop and set up routines that are going to work for you and for your family. So the first thing that you have to do when it comes to setting up a routine is to determine what areas are most important right now. Like what areas of your daily life right now are most chaotic and crazy. Like they're the areas that need the routine the most. And I encourage you to only really pick one area to start with, because this is all about slowly building up these routines. If you try to just rush out of the gate with this whole big elaborate plan of what your routine for your family is going to look like, it will probably lose steam and fall flat by week 2. And we don't want that to happen. So what you're going to do is to first determine where the greatest need is. For most people, it's the morning and evening routines. So if in the morning time, everything just feels so crazy and chaotic and like nobody knows where their backpack is. Nobody, has lunch made. Nobody knows what's going on for the day. Or at night, like everybody is like fighting bedtime and things are just completely and totally crazy and you're crashing every night because you're exhausted. You and your family could probably benefit from a better and more efficient and effective morning and evening routine. And so I would suggest just starting with developing those routines first before moving on and developing other routines like a cleaning routine, a bill pay routine, a family meeting routine. Before you go into any of those other types of daily routine and rituals, your family is going to benefit more from sticking to one solid routine until it becomes second nature before implementing a new one. And so here's how you're going to do that. What you're going to do is that you are going to write out what a typical day looks like for you. So you're going to write down what time you typically get up in the morning. And you're going to write down what you typically do after you get up in the morning. And you're going to literally just hour by hour, which I know this sounds meticulous, but this is so, so important because you need to identify the weakest areas in your current routine and the areas that need the most help. And you're not going to be able to do that if you don't take an honest and real look at what your daily life currently looks like. And so just hour by hour, you're going to write down what your typical day looks like, all the way from the time you wake up to the time you go to bed and your sleeping time. So how many hours of sleep are you getting in a night? Is that enough? Is that effective for you? Because if it's not, you also that needs to be a priority. So that goes along with like the morning and the evening routines, because you want to make sure that you're getting yourself, or you're allowing yourself and your family enough time to sleep. So when you're looking at your typical day that you've just written down and how it all flows, what do you notice most? Like maybe it doesn't actually flow. Like maybe you notice that it's not actually flowing into one continuous stream of events. If it's not flowing, you need to identify those areas where it's chaotic and crazy and it's not flowing. Again, that's for most people, that is typically the morning and evening routine. So for most people, that is where they would need to start with developing effective routines. But maybe for you, it's a totally different area. Maybe like lunchtime is just totally crazy for you because you never have anything planned for lunch, and then you just end up having to run out and get fast food for lunch. Whatever it may be, you need to identify, highlight, circle, post-it note, whatever, those particular areas in your daily, during your typical day that need the most help. So some questions to ask yourself as you are looking over your typical day is, do you need more margin time in your day? And don't just ask this question for yourself, but also review it through the lens of your kids. If your kids are old enough that you can actually ask them this question and they would know what you mean by margin time, ask them, like, do you guys need more like breathing space in our typical family schedule? I have one friend, she actually asked her her two kids this, and they both immediately go, yes, mom, we are exhausted. We don't want to, her daughter was like, mom, I honestly don't want to do gymnastics anymore. I haven't wanted to do gymnastics for a while, but I've been scared to say that. And the son didn't want to play baseball anymore. And the reality is that both of these kids, they were in so many different extracurricular activities that they had no margin time, and they also didn't love all of these extracurricular activities that they were in, and they were so long. It was just like everybody was in this routine of being crazy and chaotic, and things were just, everybody's being pulled in all these different directions for so long, and they were so accustomed to it that no one really said anything about it until this mom was brave enough to ask her family and to find out from them, okay, do you need more breathing room? Like, is there something that you don't want to do anymore? Is there, a certain area that we can improve upon in our family's daily life? And so you want to make sure that you are not only asking yourself that question, but you're asking your family that question as well, because you might be surprised by the answers. Because the truth is that margin time is crucial, guys. If you have no breathing room in your current day-to-day life, you are not only going to burn yourself out from complete and utter exhaustion, but you're going to have a whole slew of other just crazy health and mental health issues if you do not create margin in your day. If you're looking at your day and looking at me right now going, lady, you are crazy. I cannot create margin in my day. There's absolutely no way. There's too many things going on. Like, who are you? Like, what's, listen, friend, listen. You are in charge of your schedule. You're in charge of it. And chances are you are in charge of your family schedule as well. So you get to choose what is most important, and you get to choose how you're going to spend that time. Like I said before, my friend whose kids came to her and said that they didn't want to do those extracurricular activities anymore, it was shocking to this mom. My friend was completely and totally shocked that her kids didn't want to do this anymore. She had no idea. For so long, her kids had not wanted to do these things, and instead, everybody just kept doing it. So you would be surprised that there are probably things within your schedule that you might not even need, and that you might not even want to do anymore. There might be things that your kids don't want to do anymore. You are in control over your schedule. You get to determine what stays on that schedule and what does not. You're in charge. So if you need more margin time, it is up to you to make it happen. You have to make that a priority. And so with that, the next question you need to ask yourself when you are looking over your typical daily routine that you wrote down, the question you need to ask yourself is, what do I need to add or take away to make my day and my family's day, the normal daily routine, more effective and more efficient? What needs to be added or taken away to facilitate the routine and the type of flow and the type of daily life that I want my family to have? And I encourage you to get your spouse's input on this, and your kids, again, if they're old enough to give you that kind of feedback, to bring your kids on board and ask them these questions as well, because you will be surprised, especially kids. Kids are really good at identifying weak areas. They're very good at that. But I would encourage you to ask them, because you might be surprised by what they say or what they suggest. And it can a lot of times be very helpful and beneficial in understanding where you need to change things within your schedule. So now, after you've done this sort of soul searching with what your current daily life looks like, I want you now to do the same exercise that you just did, where you wrote down what your typical day looks like. I want you now to do that same exercise, except with what you actually want your day to look like. Okay, so let's say that right now you currently your alarm is set to go off at 6, but you don't typically get out of bed until 7, and then you're rushed and everything's crazy. But the reality is that you would actually really love to get up at 6 o'clock. 6 o'clock is when you truly, absolutely want to get up every single morning, so you have time to drink a cup of coffee without being rushed off out the door and everything being crazy. So write that down. Write down that 6 a.m. is when you get up. Don't write down that 6 a.m. is when you want to get up. Write down that 6 a.m. is when you get up. It's when you get up. So if that getting up at 6 a.m. every single morning is super important to you, and that's what you want your typical ideal day to look like, you need to make sure that you have allotted enough time for you to go to sleep. And this is what I was meaning by when I was talking about the flow of your routine. The flow of your routine, it starts in the morning and it flows down into the nighttime, but it also flows the other way too, because if you are going to bed like super late, or you're going to bed and the house is completely trashed before you go to bed, like that trickles over into the next day, into the morning, into that routine as well. So it just keeps trickling down, trickling down, trickling down. It's this whole flow that happens. And so you want to make sure that when you are setting up this like typical ideal daily routine that you want, you've got to make sure that it flows and that it makes sense and that it flows through. Now, of course, writing down your ideal typical day is going to be a little bit different than putting it into practice. But by having it written down, by having this ideal life, if you will, this ideal daily life written down, it gives you sort of a plan to follow. You don't have to follow this perfectly. You're not expected to follow this perfectly, but what you're expected to do is to follow this. And then as you're following this over several days, you're going to identify, okay, well, this part that I had written down isn't really working so well. So you maybe take that off and maybe replace it with something else, or you just make that open to margin time. So you're going to it'll be a continuous trial and error until you finally find that rhythm and that flow. And so to give you an example of what our kind of new family routine is starting to look like, now that my kids are a little bit older, my two oldest are in elementary school and my youngest is in preschool. So I no longer have three kids in the home with me 24/7. It's kind of nice, but it's also been a little bit of a struggle for me to figure out new routines that are kind of working within this new family life that we have, this new season that we're in, right? So the routines that we have in place now, again, I get up at 5 a.m. every morning. I have my time, and then 6 a.m. is when my boys, their alarm goes off. They get up, they have their breakfast. They know that they're allowed to have their breakfast time is from 6 to 6:30. And then after that, they have to brush their teeth. They have to get dressed. They have to make their beds, get their backpacks in order. And then we go down to the bus. The bus typically shows up right at 7 a.m. And then after I come in the house from taking my boys to the bus stop, I start a load of laundry. I clean up the kitchen from the kids and their breakfast. Like they have to put their plates and stuff in the sink, but then I go in and I wipe down the counters and I do all of that. And then at 7:30 is when my daughter gets up, and then I get her situated with some breakfast. And then I go and I take my shower and I get myself ready. And then at 8 o'clock, we get her ready to go to school. And I make my bed, she makes her bed, we do a quick tidy up of the house, and so usually by then, the washing machine is done washing the load of laundry that I put in from when I dropped my boys off at the bus stop, and so then I put that load of laundry in the dryer, and then me and my daughter, we load up in the car, and we head off to her preschool, and I drop her off, and so I'm usually home by 9 o'clock. I make myself another pot of coffee, because I love coffee, it's wonderful. It's amazing. And then typically at that time, the load of laundry that was in the dryer is now done drying. And so I can fold it. And so I fold it immediately from the dryer into my laundry basket, and I bring it upstairs because my laundry room's in the basement, and I put all the laundry up that was in that basket. And then after I've done that, which is usually around 9:30ish, like between like 9:20 and 9:30ish, I can sit down and get some work done. And so I will typically work from 9:30 until 11 o'clock. And at 11 o'clock is when I will do whatever my big cleaning task is for that day. So for instance, for today, it is cleaning windows, which is actually the task I hate the most. Absolutely hate it the most. But that is my cleaning task for today. That's the big one, is cleaning windows. And so I have to go and clean up the blinds and the windows in my house. And then once I'm done doing that, which is usually I'm done by 11:30 with that. But usually by 11:30 I'm done. So that's when I will actually make my lunch. And then I will sit down and eat my lunch. And then I'll play on social media for a little bit. And then at 12:30 I get in the car and I go sit in carpool and read whatever current book I'm reading while waiting in carpool to pick up my daughter at 1. And so pick her up at 1, bring her back home. And then, so between 1:30 and 2:30 is kind of just like me and Charlotte time. We get to hang out. I get to hear about her day. And she gets to have her after school snack. And then at 2:30, I go down to the bus stop and wait on the bus. And so my boys, they come in the house, they have their snack, they put up their school stuff. And then at 3:30, We do homework until 4, and at 4, I start making dinner. I start prepping dinner, and then we usually have dinner between 5 and 5:30. Then we do a cleanup, and then we all do a big cleanup of the house and the kitchen and everything else. And then that way from 6 until bedtime, my kids can play and have fun. We can play, have fun, and then any extracurricular activities that my kids are in. And then typically at 7 is when we will start everybody getting ready for bed. So we'll start getting our kids ready for bed, from bath times to showers to story and prayer time to any sort of like last minute things that need to go over. And then everyone is in bed by 8 o'clock. That does not mean, now here's the thing, that does not mean that they have actually fallen asleep by 8 o'clock. I want to be very clear about that. Usually all 3 of them are asleep by 8:30, which is wonderful because this allows me and my husband to have time together. So from 8 o'clock until 9:30, that is like me and my husband's time together. This is our time together where we talk about our days and like how everything's has gone that day because we haven't seen each other all day. We'll talk about anything that needs to be discussed. We'll watch TV together. We'll play a game together. We'll do whatever, like that's just our time to be with each other. And we value it very, very, very much. But at 9:30, that is when I start getting ready for bed. And then I'm asleep by 10:15 and I get up at 5 a.m. So that is my typical day routine. And of course, your daily routine is going to look totally different than mine. But I just shared that with you so you would have an idea of how we have made things sort of flow throughout the day in order to make sure that things aren't compounding onto each other. So if you're really struggling with getting these routines in place and figuring things out, I highly recommend both the book, How to Manage Your Home Without Losing Your Mind by Dana White, and my book, Master Your Life, which is a pain-free guide that is designed to help you master the art of self-discipline. Because the reality is that writing down these routines is great and wonderful, but if you lack the discipline in putting these routines into action, then you are going to continuously have issues making these routines work for you and for your family. And so I wrote Master Your Life as a practical, hands-on guide to not just setting up routines, because it's a lot more than setting up routines, but setting up the stage for you to develop and master the art of self-discipline. And in the book, How to Manage Your Home Without Losing Your Mind by Dana White, it's a fantastic book, especially if you've always struggled with self-discipline and setting up routines. It's a fantastic book because she goes through and confesses how she finally got her life in order. If you're not familiar with her blog is A Slob Comes Clean. And she talks all about how she was once a slob and how she's not. And so it's a very fascinating read. I will link to both of these books in the description of this video. And I would love for you to share what your biggest routine hack is. Like, what is something that you do that's a part of your daily routine that just makes everything else flow so much better in your household for you and for your family? Please share it below in the comments.